Hi everyone, welcome back to another bass lesson. Today we're going to be looking at a fantastic jazz tune called Bernie's Tune. Bernie's Tune was composed by Bernie Miller in 1952 and was later recorded and popularized by the Gerry Mulligan Quartet. Bernie's Tune is fantastic for beginners to jazz music. The chord changes are simple, they are easy to play, and it has a really great, catchy little melody that I'm sure you'll also love playing. Getting into the form for Bernie's Tune, we're using the most common layout in jazz music, and that's the AA-BA form. The A sections are 8 bars long, and so is the B section. We'll start off with the A sections. So in the A sections, we are firmly grounded in the home key of D minor with this D minor chord. In bar 3, the chord progression already takes on a little bit of a twist with this B flat 7 chord. B flat would be the 6th chord in the key of D minor, but by making it a dominant 7th, we're adding in the minor 7 on top, which will be this A flat note on top of the chord. And this gives it a bit of a cool, bluesy sound, which is nice in this key. Next we see the E minor 7 flat 5 chord and A7. Going to D minor again. This is a 2-5-1 chord progression in the key of D minor. 2-5-1s are used in jazz to return us to a previous key center, in this case to the key of D minor, or they are used to set up a new key center. We'll see an example of the latter later on in the form. So that's the roadmap for the A section. The chords are the same in the second A section, but when we get to the last bar, we see the chord progression C minor 7 F7, which is a 2-5, to set up the B flat major chord, which is the new key center in the B section. The B section showcases one of the oldest chord progressions in jazz music, and that's the 1-6-2-5 turnaround. As you get more and more into jazz, you'll start seeing this 1-6-2-5 chord progression absolutely everywhere. It's a very big part of jazz music, and it's an essential part for walking bass playing and also just for basic chord progressions. It's usually played at the end of a tune, which is where the name turnaround comes from, because it turns us back around to the top of the chord progression again. But it's also used in a standalone chord progression known as the rhythm changes. If you'd like to learn some more about that chord progression, you can check out songs like Oleo and Cottontail. Those are two nice ones that you can start with. At the end of the B section, we see another 2-5, which is the same one from the A sections, which sets up this E minor 7 flat 5 A7 thing, which sets up the key of D minor once again for the final A section. So now we've discussed the AA and B sections of the form. Finally, we've come to the last A section. Fortunately for us, the chords are identical to the first A section. These chords form our harmonic roadmap for Bernie's Tune. This roadmap is then repeated over and over and over again until the tune is completed. Repeating the chord progression ad nauseum, if you will, is common practice for many jazz tunes. This gives us plenty of opportunities to practice our walking bass lines. So now, with all of that said, let's finally get into the exercises for this lesson today. We'll be working through a series of exercises which are designed to ease you into playing your first full walking bass line. I like to start with just playing whole notes and half notes using root notes for each chord in the chord progression, if you are a beginner to walking bass playing. It's important to establish a solid grounding with root notes before branching out into more complex walking lines. Feel free to use the tab notation as we work through these exercises to make it a bit easier for you. So now let's get into the first exercise, which is playing long notes just using roots. The next step is to add the fifth to each of these chords. This means we'll be playing 2 notes per bar from start to end of the chord progression. This will give us what's called a 2-feel bass line. On the bass, roots and fifths have a couple of different patterns that we can use. This shape will be the root and the fifth above it. So playing the note D on the 5th fret of the A string, we can find the 5th of that chord by going to the 7th fret of the D string. So it's that shape there. That will be a root on the bottom and then the 5th on the top. Alternatively, we can play the 5th underneath the root note, which is in some ways even easier. You just go directly underneath the root to the 5th fret A on the E string. So once again, there's our root, 5th fret on the A string for D, and the 5th is A, so we'll play 5th fret on the E string for the A note. These 2 shapes will work for all of the chords in this chord progression, except for the one that's called E minor 7 flat 5, because of course the 5 is flattened, so it's a little bit of a different shape. So if we look at that one, for example, let's say we play the E on the 7th fret of the A string. This will be the shape. We're going to go up to the 5th on the 8th fret of the D string. So it's that pattern. And you can play this in any way that you want. You can play it with the first finger and the second finger. You can play it with the second and the third. You can play it any way you want. The second shape is sort of the opposite of that, right? So we're going to play that same root note in the same spot, but take the 5th down the octave. So root on the 7th fret of the A string and the flat 5 on the 6th fret of the E string. So here's exercise 2. Next, we'll add the thirds into our walking bass line, and just a little bit, just some little hints of some walking bass, just to help us to bridge the gap between this 2-feel line and our first full walking bass line. I think that's a nice way to do it, rather than going right from the 2-feel into our first full walking bass line. We can just add in some bursts of walking from time to time. And that's just a nice way to do it, in my opinion. So let's have a listen to exercise number 3. And last, we are now ready to play our first full walking bass line to Bernie's tune. And this one will be using all of the previous examples that we just looked at. So roots, thirds, fifths, but we're also going to add the sevenths on top, major and minor, and just a little bit of passing note action, just some extra little spicy bits that we all love to hear in walking bass playing. So let's get into exercise 4 and we'll hear how that sounds. That's it for now. I hope you enjoy digging into these walking bass exercises and you find some ideas to improve upon your own walking bass playing. I recommend taking your time with each exercise before moving on to the next one to really get the most out of your practice sessions. All of the exercises can be downloaded from my Patreon page in both standard notation as well as tab. So, thank you so much for watching the video. Now get out of here.